You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seat belts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast, part 2 of 2 on why Magic is in the junk wax area. It's all a giant steaming pile of shit, and we're going to get stuck with the bill. Yeah. Let's go.
So last time we talked about how sports cards got into the junk wax era, and for those who forgot, it basically was this nostalgia kick of the baby boomers looking back to their childhood and saying, oh, all these odds and ends from when I was growing up, these cards, these toys, they are now worth money. Let me go rebuy them and also start investing in my child's future by buying sports cards, toys, etc. from this era, imparting that ideal on those children. And now you have both ends of the spectrum flooding the market with money to buy infinite cards to then flood the market with those infinite cards, trying to move them back as singles. Meanwhile, capitalism says, keep printing more cards because the demand is there. And now everybody forever is flooding the market with infinite cards.
Yep.
And that's where we left off. So today, first up, well, how did that really parallel to Magic? And we touched on that a little bit at the end of this episode because it was really hard to not steamroll directly into this. But I'm going to bring up an image that we've used a couple of times over here. So if you just want to take it away as we're talking about this.
Yeah. So we've used this image a lot. And it was the image that we cited multiple times when we would say Wizards of the Coast says there is no evidence that we are overprinting a goddamn thing. Look at this. Look at the number of sets, how it has exploded. The worst part is if you look at 22, very, very small on the bottom, there are 48 plus secret layers because when this image was released, we weren't even done for the year yet. Nope, it was an average of, if you spaced it out, I believe it was like 3.8 or 4.8 days between set releases. Now, to be clear, there is a possibility that a market exists for that many sets, but it is not Magic. It was not sports cards in the 90s. Nope. that market existed and could be sustainable long term. And if sports cards, which no offense to any Magic players or vendors watching this, have a much broader appeal than Magic the Gathering, does not have an audience captive enough to capitalize on that, why in the world would you think that Magic the Gathering does? A game that is played by people for money and has no tie to real life whatsoever, and people can just outgrow and lose interest. And especially when it's a thing where the secondary market is so important to the health of the product. Don't get me wrong, the game at one time was great. I guess it's fine now, but Damage doesn't use the stack, which still hits me deep. But
Mod Fantastic was only fantastic for so long.
It was so good. But we don't have the kind of long-term viability that sports provides.
Not yet.
Not yet. Sports aren't going anywhere. You can invest in that and know that that sport is still going to exist.
Yep.
Not having that ability in this, how can you not think that this is evidence of overprinting? Which was obviously the summation of episode 1 was don't print too much shit. So how then can Wizards of the Coast get out of this? How can we get out of the junk wax era? Well, how did sports cards get out of it?
Yep. So we talked about this before the cast because the only thing that I could find was that the companies that wanted to reclaimed their product. They bought it back.
And I will say that kind of program pseudo exists now. But it's not that Wizards will buy it back.
No.
It's that some distros will buy it back. Now, the thing is, if you're paying $84 to $90-something for this box as LGS, I am buying it from my distro for that. They're not paying you that. they're paying you like $69 when they buy it back. So you are taking a loss. And that was how basically sports cards mended the relationship with hobby stores. Was a manufacturers and distros said, nope, we'll buy it back for full purchase price. We're going to have to eat that. And that was a program that was spearheaded by Topps, by Upper Deck, by Don Russ, by all of these companies that were doing it, that were in the industry, because they recognized, look, we need to walk this back. This is bad.
Yeah.
And the other way they did it was kind of market driven. I remember like being in the sports hobby at this time, and it started being, oh, they're drastically reducing print runs. We're not getting nearly as much stuff next year. And everyone was like, okay, that's great. I love that.
Why not? Yeah.
But the interest also died down a lot. And that was part of why all of a sudden you were able to get these things, because the prices started to go up because interest drowned. Well, at that point, we're in a true collector's market. The people that are buying these cards are the people that want to collect them.
Yes, yeah.
Which is fine short term. But again, you need that healthy balance for it to work out.
Yep. So, and it was a loss of customer profile across the board. We lost everyone in sports cards, from the pack cracker to the person who just stands for their team and only their team. They buy that set every year, to the whale, the person just buying everything they can. It all dropped off. This was not a great time for a lot of hobby shops either, because you were sitting on a ton of excess product, both in terms of singles and sealed. And the only way to reclaim anything on the sealed was to hope that it was bought back. And that when production was scaled back, like you said, people would come in. You know, hobby shops weren't that difficult to find in most places.
Yeah.
They were fairly abundant. So it's not like people were driving all over the place to look for them. So if the market shrinks, that's shuttered business.
Yep. And that's, again, as a player, in our case, not great.
Nope.
Because all of a sudden, the place where I go to play, the place where I hang out, the place where, I buy my product, is now shuttered and is not there to service my profile, my needs as a customer. We're left with nothing. It feels bad. And the worst part is, again, this was brought on by the manufacturers of the product. It was driven by greed. It was driven by the desire to make more money. Consequences be damned. We're getting as much money to, and granted, they were privately owned companies, but Hasbro is not. We're getting the money to our shareholders. We want to make our shareholders happy at the expense of everything else.
Yep.
Which, not to tie it back to the Altifox thing, if you really need to make your shareholders happy, maybe you're doing something wrong as a company.
Yeah.
But that's for another episode.
So, insofar as what we've seen WotC do historically, the only time I remember them walking back a product was Dragon's Maze. It moved so poorly that eventually... Well, WotC didn't walk it back. Distro did. Distro walked it back because it just wasn't moving.
Yeah.
And it just creates a logjam. If you can't move it as an LGS, there's a problem there. That means you're either, your fairly hand-to-mouth income or your cyclical income that you're dependent on is now tied up in illiquid product, and you won't be able to order from distro. And that ripples all the way, usually it'd say down, but up in this case.
Yeah.
It's going to, if you can't buy from distro doesn't make their money, they can't buy more from WotC, and now WotC has a problem.
Yeah.
So we have this reclamation project for Dragon's Maze. Outside of that, I don't really remember, because I really wasn't in tune with this stuff until around then, any other time this has happened. And I can't remember a time since then that this happened. They've done other odds and ends like, hey, if your card came out like crap, those kind of reclamation projects.
Like there's always the, oh, mea culpa, your card came out missing a piece of it. If you don't recognize that, you should definitely just take that to the Facebook group. We will send you a new pack, or whatever the case is.
Yep.
Outside of that, WotC has been so stick to their guns about everything. We've talked about this. Literally what happened when Hasbro purchased Wizards of the Coast. They doubled down on their reserve list decision. They said, you know what? Nope, we're sticking to our guns. We are absolutely right. This is not changing. The last time that they walked something back that wasn't Dragon's Maze was effectively the reserve list loophole, because people complained enough that they said the foil promos, which I still contend, whatever. But they haven't really taken ownership outside of Dragon's Maze, and then admittedly when the debacle over the Mythic Edition happened, and they literally just had to walk it back. They couldn't not. Okay, well, they still fucked that up somehow. But that's the other time that they've walked something back. Other than that, they have always stuck to their guns of infallibility, which is what really worries me about their ability to do the things that took the sports card market out of that era.
Yeah. And, I mean, at that point, you're going to find out that with one particular product, there's going to be that inflection point. And this is where demand just begins to drop. And you monitor it. How long it takes for you to react appropriately, TBD on that.
Yeah.
So that all the products from that point on will start to rot. So the only thing you can do at that point, as WotC, is scale back your print run requests.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, you just let distro take care of it. And like you said, if you're going to stick to your guns like they have, historically, then that is what the tradition will be moving forward. Why would WotC buy any of this back to put in its own warehouse? Let it rot at distro and then let distro fire sale it later on.
We've gotten our money because, again, we just want to make our shareholders happy.
And I think historically, the only product truly that was destroyed by WotC was Summer.
And Alpha at the first Gen Con.
I mean,
that doesn't really count, though. That's, Yeah, Summer. And that's... How long ago now? That was 94.
94? Yeah.
Damn near 30 years.
Yep. So, historically speaking, destruction not in the cards, no pun intended, and WotC buying back product directly or through distro also not really something that we've ever seen. So the only solution then is to just scale back and let whatever's in the ecosystem exist in the ecosystem and let that part of it take care of itself. Now, like you said, you have a hard time believing that WotC would pull back on this. I feel like that's more of a Hasbro request than anything else.
Well, I think especially with them extending rotation, and then coming out and saying, "Hey guys, if it's in standard, we'll reprint it as much as we need to if there is a need." That is the most direct evidence that we are all about not giving a fuck. We're just going to print it into the ground as long as people want to buy it.
Yeah, this is actually something that I asked almost immediately when we were discussing the standard rotation. Was okay. It's now 3 years. We have 4 print runs, effectively, 4 print waves for a standard set. Does that mean we're going to get an additional 2 print runs? Do we think there's going to be anything to this? Maybe. We might actually see more print runs for standard sets now versus any other format and what we expect there. So, will standard have any kind of realistic price point? No, probably not if they're going to reprint as much as they say they will to keep that format fresh and moving and cards coming flowing into the ecosystem to, quote, make it matter. To do that, that usually means that cards have to be fairly affordable.
Yeah. It just doesn't feel good for anybody involved at that point. Look, we're printing it for 4 years. Even if we don't print it, even if we're like, you know what, this isn't really selling, we're not going to do it. It doesn't matter, because at that point, the consumer faith in your promise to them is so low, and who gives a shit?
Yeah.
We're not going to buy it anyways. And then you add in... I just don't think that they're quite aware of what they're doing and where it parallels. And I understand. Who am I? I'm just some fucking dude, right? I don't work at WotC. I don't make that money. I don't make those high-level decisions. I don't really care. It's just overall not a good look.
Yeah. We just have the data point in front of us that says this is what led to the junk wax era in sports cards. And now we're seeing with this Lord of the Rings set that distro is sold out in pre-order. And I assume that's happened here and there with some sets. But I'm going to go ahead and maintain that I don't think this set ever exists on shelves in the long run. If
I don't think
they only print it like the 1 or 2 times. If they want to print it 3 or 4 times, then yeah, sure, by all means do that. If they don't release the ring wherever that's going in the first print wave or 2, then yeah, the product has a longer shelf life because of that. There's some small levers that you can pull to make this product continue to sell over time.
Yeah.
But it's once that ring is found and people have the character cards they need that this inflects back into the market. All these singles inflect back into the market.
Yep.
And now you have just this deluge back into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Most likely in a fashion that we've never seen before. Original Dom, very popular in the beginning, in the middle of its lifespan, a bit towards the end as it got harder to find because there were only 3 print waves of it. Modern Horizons 2, finally, like truly disappearing from distro despite how good that set was.
Yeah.
Like, that should give
Took a while.
Yeah, exactly. It took a while, and that should give people an idea of like when distro says, "Hey, we're already sold out. We have nothing else left until WotC prints it again." That should give you an idea of immediately how many cards are going to be floated back into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that is super concerning for me, just and like in the micro sense for this set.
Yeah. And I know we've said this before, it seems very much like a toy mentality at producing something that cares about a secondary market.
Yeah.
And the difference between the toy mentality, which toys have a very robust secondary market,
Yep.
is that that's not your target audience. Your target audience is the kid that doesn't give a shit.
Correct.
He's just going to spend whatever on whatever, and it doesn't matter.
Exactly. The one of figure in the case.
Yeah.
That is for your secondary market person. That person. The 12-inch Greedo. That is for your secondary market. No child wants a 12-inch tall Greedo toy when Star Wars was released the second time in the 90s. Yeah. That's for your collectors. For your whales who need to have everything.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff.
It's an irresponsible use of your resources to me.
Yeah.
To release products this way. And I don't think Wizards is capable of stopping because of how continually we see them double down on the not overprinting, not overproducing. We have good sales data on all of our sets. We have good engagement. And you know what? Maybe that's all true. They just won't release any of those figures for people to see, even their shareholders, which is kind of dog shit. But, I mean, them's the breaks, I guess, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You can't not allow that. But it just feels really bad. So, do they want to?
Yeah.
Do you think they want to? Just scale back on the print runs to get out of this seemingly junk wax era?
To spend more time talking about this now than in the first episode.
Yeah.
If I'm WotC and I want my game to be highly accessible, I need my product to be cheap at all points in the ecosystem. And that ecosystem is from printing to play. Any point in there where one can acquire a card, I need it to be cheap. So in order to do that, I either need to print a ton of it so it's highly available, or I need to make the tournament aspect of the game so like toxic that people only play casual formats. So the drivers for all of the competitive cards disappear.
Yeah.
And that allows me to change the way I print my game now, and I just print for the casuals. And like, it's a weird rabbit hole to fall down if you're just like, no, everything needs to be as cheap as possible all the time, and I don't care about my tournament scene, fuck it.
Yeah.
If you want everything to be as cheap as possible, and you care about your tournament scene, then you make it an LG, an LCG.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. But we can't change the type of the game we are, almost 3.5 decades in, so we
Yep.
got to stick with trading card games. So what do? I don't know. Supplementals all year long, longer shelf life on standard. So now anything that costs money are for older formats that we no longer want to support. Okay, so what about the interim older format? We have Pioneer. I don't know. Whenever we feel like it, just fire hose that scene with Challenger decks or whatever they're called, and that's how we'll upcycle older cards into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We can do that. And at that point, you're just shedding all your old head players, which is fine. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to keep playing the game in a way that makes them happy at a tournament scene. You can keep playing the game the way you enjoy it at home or at places that celebrate those older formats.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine. There are a lot of options overall. None of them, I believe, actually allow the secondary market as we know it to survive in the shape we see it today. So all your vendors that are just out here pushing Magic product, they're gone. Because it's now everything's printed into the dirt. There's no money to make on anything in a standard print run.
Yep.
And we are printing this, there's eight print waves a year. We're going above 6. We're going 8, not 80 years, sorry. 8 for a set's lifespan. So that's roughly, 2 and change a year? 2 and a third a year, something like that? Cool. No standard card should cost more than $5. Well, F me if I'm a dedicated Magic vendor, I guess. If I don't have my own tournament series, if I don't have my own locals where I can actually sell older cards.
It just feels bad.
It does, 100%. It's a real feels bad, and it makes the ecosystem pretty rocky. Because if your LGSs have to rely on standard for the tournament scene to get people in, because that's what's left. WotC's pushing standard, that's the tournament scene, or Pioneer. How are you supposed to get singles into the hands of your players when they cost nothing? You're buying them for nothing and reselling them for nothing. And it puts the LGS in a real weird bind. So that is, I think, the absolute one wrinkle that I can't iron out myself is how, if you're going to keep this as a TCG, to wrap up, if you're going to keep this as a TCG, and you're going to print standard sets effectively into the ground, and you're going to promote standard at the regional level and at the Pro Tour level, how do you support the LGS in such a way that they can afford to give their players access to singles when everything costs nothing? Or are they just places to sell sealed and good luck and let players let it go back to being a trading card game and TCG player take over that aspect and LGS's shutter standard singles? Maybe.
I don't think there is a way for them to do it now that they have become so devoted to the premium program. And that, like, from an LGS perspective, is kind of my worry, is I don't know that they possibly can, because they have started pushing so much for stores to become premium, because it's not just, get premium and we'll, let you host an extra RCQ or stuff. It's like, here's extra promos that you get, like the ampersand promos. The stores that got those, there were quite a few, and this is not a secret, that just straight up sold them because they were like $15,000 for the set when they first came out. That's a premium benefit. And the thing is, to become premium, you have to invest so much money, and they do have grant programs to help out, but it doesn't cover everything, to basically turn your store into their moving target of what it is. Because if it takes you any length of time to get premium, that target is going to move the entire time. We want this kind of table. Okay, cool, you're good. Well, now we want these boxes replaced. Now we want these kinds of shelves. And it's very exclusionary for your run-of-the-mill LGS, because all of the benefits of being an LGS are now tied to the premium program. I don't get extra allocation. You don't give me affordable singles. You don't give me worthwhile singles. You give me overly affordable singles as an LGS. My only choice is to find a way to buy and sell the same dual lands, fetch lands, whatever, from my community without traveling outside of it. That's difficult for an LGS.
Yeah.
That's not a problem that they had before, but it's definitely a problem they have now.
Yeah. I don't know if I was an LGS what I would be doing in regards to singles for this set, because to me this is going to set precedent for standard, despite the fact that it is a direct to modern set. Everybody, I'm out. I'm out of sealed product, right? So that's not a question. It's all, well, not out per se. I've allocated everything I need for pre-release weekend and release weekend. Maybe there will be some stuff left over because fuzzy math, depending on how I prize out. Am I a store that prizes on points, on record, whatever? I make my guesstimate. I'm not tapped, but there's no sealed to put on the shelf anymore. It's gone, let's just say. Okay, people come in, they want the one ring. We know that. Everybody's going to want the ring.
Yeah, naturally.
And people are like Aragorn, like we talked about last episode, I believe. We just got Shalab. Name a rare that's named after a person or a mythic. People are going to want it. Okay, so how do we get it in? Yep. We got to buy it. Okay, they're really expensive right now. Do we want to wait for a couple of weeks until they come flooding back in? Okay, yeah, we do. And then you wait a couple of weeks, and everything comes flooding back in. It all comes flooding back in because people just cracked looking for either the one ring or the characters they wanted from the boxes to see things with basically the same fresh eyes they had when they were first playing this game, because it's been reskinned to look a certain way, and it's going to make them feel a certain way when they do this. So they just chain through their product, and then it's going to come back. Okay, what are we paying on it? Dirt. Why?
Because you have to.
Exactly. Because TCG Player and everybody else that has it in stock has infinite dirt.
Yep.
And in the words of Trent Reznor, it is my empire of dirt.
Yes, that is exactly what it is. Love Nine Inch Nails. Oh, great.
It's a good Johnny Cash cover, too.
It is.
And if this is the precedent, now I've got to figure out standard off of this. And that makes me very worried as an LGS to see what I'm going to do and how I can best support my players and their standard play. Because I want people coming in, which means I need to support the organized play model. Okay, cool. We're a standard and pioneer shop. We do modern whenever, right?
Yeah.
Whenever relevant. And I need to figure out how to make that standard model work now. It's yet another new model. And it's going to be shaky. And I don't think I'm ever going to be excited for it if it turns out the way I think it is, which is just they're going to print it all forever. I mean, I have like 3 or 4 sets lead time, I think, from what we talked about. Wilds of Eldraine, we know, was not designed with the new standard paradigm in mind. So I believe that means that what comes after Wilds of Eldraine? What's the return set after that? Ikoria. Not Ikoria. No, Ixalan. The other
it is Ixalan, right? Yep.
Dungeoneers of Ixalan, or whatever it is. Caverns of Ixalan. We're going underground, whatever it is.
Woo! Journey to the Land of the Lost, please.
Hopefully. If that does come after Wilds of Eldraine, and it was designed for this rotation, that means it's most likely also going to start to have been printed like it needs to be for this new rotation, and I'll know around then. And if it's not then I'll know for first set of 2024. So I'll know in the middle to end of Q4 2023 what allocation is going to look like for the set for Q1 2024, and I'll have an okay idea of where we are, and the more sets I see like this quarter over quarter, I'll be able to see what distro is offering me and get a feel for how much product is out there and how I will best be able to support my locals as an LGS, or if I'm a vendor, how much I realistically need to buy and support people who are buying cards. Because that's the other thing as a vendor is, if I'm going to be doing pre-orders, that means I got to price properly. And if everybody's getting everything, that is an interesting model and an interesting problem for me to solve, because that means I can also get everything. So what do I do? How much do I buy? How much do I need to spend on this set? Right? And it's going to change little by little over time. And to bring it all back to the junk wax era, if people are just going to be buying in because LGSs and vendors set their prices so low, then anybody who buys sealed will just flood the market. And now everybody is stuck with it. And it just sits there and rots.
Yep.
And like, not literally rots. There will be churn.
Yeah.
But you're not going to see levels drop.
Exactly. It's a churn that leads to loss. That's the problem. Not just for the LGS, for everyone. It's just bad.
Yeah, you'll see copies move, but as more copies enter the market, people want to sell their copy and make any kind of money back from this. So they're going to set it at the lowest possible they can just to recoup something. And lower and lower and lower. And nobody will be able to effectively put a dent in the amount of supply that's coming out because the demand just isn't there.
Yeah. Oh boy.
So
it's terrible.
It is. And we'll probably catch you guys about this again in like 8 months, which is Q1 2024. We'll see what that next set print run looks like, what disk drill looks like, what allocation looks like, and we'll see where we are for our new standards.
Yeah.
Like I said, I am hoping that the Lord of the Rings set does not set a precedent, that this is just people who love the IP buying in, and that this is kind of a flash in the pan, but because of the sheer number of sets we've seen over time, waning interest in Standard on the whole, be it because the format could have been really bad this entire time, or everything was printed fairly well, we could be headed straight into the junk wax era of Magic.
Hooray!
Indeed. All right. Picks?
Yes.
Okay. You can go first, because you got a little buddy to talk about.
I do. So, my pick is...
Hold on.
Oh.
This is a barbarian?
It is.
Okay.
Human Barbarian Shaman.
Oh, God. It has so many
It's got
jobs.
it's multi-classed.
It's true.
Yeah. I am speaking about Dragon Speaker Human Barbarian Shaman. Just Dragon Speaker Shaman. As far as what set, yes, absolutely. Doesn't matter. Why this card? Well, we got a confirmed reprinting of Ramos Jin Fizz Dragon Engine, and we have Smog coming out. So what that means is obviously dragons.
Yep.
So there's two kind of dragon lords, I would say. There's Dragon Speaker Shaman and Dragon Lord Servant. I am specifically picking Dragon Speaker Shaman because this card, I think, is better for multiple reasons than Dragon Lord Servant. Why? Well, it has been reprinted more. It has been printed a total of 9 times compared to 8. The big difference being 2 of those reprints are of substantial size, and it's the 2 commander decks that it was in, Adventures in Forgotten Realms in 2017.
Yep.
There's a third one that's the starter commander decks. That was not a very large print run, doesn't really impact things. Looking at TCG Player, 5 of the 9 listings all have less than 100 copies across every condition. The highest listing is on the Scourge version. So while we get more dragons out, that raises the profile of dragons. There's a natural order to things being bought at that point. And it starts with the most recent and works its way back. So the most recent was like the Dragon Archway or whatever, where you can run any number of them. Fetch stuff up. And then there's Dragon Lord Servant. And then we have Dragon Speaker Shaman, which kind of just fell by the wayside. It's not as popular anymore. It's a 2/2 for 3. It makes dragon spells cost 2 less, though.
Yeah.
Whereas Dragon Lord Servant is only 1 less for a 1/3 body for 2 mana.
Yep.
I think this card's great because not only are these listings so low on some of the copies, but listings across the board have been decreasing over the last couple of months, while the price has actually remained relatively stagnant. Now, looking at the sales history, you can see that there's not a lot of velo here for LP near mint copies, but there's a ton of velo for HP. For Scourge, you're looking at a couple copies selling every day. Likewise for Jumpstart 22, those just don't have the supply that you would look for. Now, looking at the 2 commander printings, Near mint is where the velocity is at. Now, why I'm mentioning this is because it's very important when taking these picks to choose your customer profile. It's going to be way easier to buy out an MP copy of this card if you're going Scourge and then sell them all than it is a near mint or LP, because a price differential on a card that old actually isn't insignificant. I mean, it's like, 10, 20 cents in a lot of cases, but that adds up across quantity.
Yes. Yeah.
As far as exit velo and exit timeline, it kind of depends on a few things.
Okay.
So if by some chance we get more dragons in Return to Throne of Eldraine, it's a really good time to exit this card. If by some chance we get more dragons in Journey to the Center of the Earth Ikoria,
Excellent.
or Ixalan, sorry, yeah. Guess what? Good time to get rid of dragons.
Yeah.
If Beasts of Ikoria or whatever, that one also has dragons, there's another one. On the flip side, at the current price point where most copies are actually sitting below like 50 cents. The highest is going to be the dual deck printing or Arch Enemy, which were so low run, they just naturally have a higher price of like $1 at the floor.
Yep. Yeah.
Get 30, get 40. The thing is, people only want one copy of this, but 1 million people want one copy of this card. So your exit is probably going to be to buy list realistically when this card pops, or you can turn a margin on it. It's not going to be in trade. The other thing is, if you do just have a nice TCG player store, you can kind of try to become the anchor for the card. Yeah. Because in a lot of these printings, we don't have a gaming co holding it back. In fact, there's some of them where there may only be 3 or 4 vendors with 4 copies or more. And those are a really good spot to hit, because people will notice the quantity diminishing, and then FOMO kicks in, and you kind of get inflated on what your numbers are because FOMO kicks in and moves the market up short term. Now, reprint equity is the thing that I'm not concerned about at all with this card.
Okay.
The reprints we've seen recently, outside of Commander Adventures and Forgotten Realms, were very small. I would expect that we would probably get closer to something like a Dragonlord Servant or a Dragon Arch, or just some new Dragon Cost Reducer Lord something.
Yeah.
Than seeing this card reprinted. I just don't think it happens. So reprint equity is very low. Timeline probably, again, going to be a little bit longer. You could go into the natural velocity of this card as it dries up, but again, velocity is kind of low on it. So this is something where we are looking for a little bit more exposure from a dragon, some new general and commander, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, we obviously have a ton of opportunities for that to come in the next year, starting with Lord of the Rings, where we have Smaug. And from there on, it's just monster, fairy tale, dinosaurs, whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of ways for dragons to become a relevant tribe again. Yeah. Not to mention the innumerable commander products we're going to get, and all of the secret layers that could reprint a relevant dragon that all of a sudden, oh, let's do this. Not to mention Ur-Dragon reprint and Commander Legends. Just a really good opportunity. I think it's a solid look, if nothing else, because it's not all about picking very liquid, high-velocity cards when you're choosing picks. Sometimes there are a few more slow churn things that may take a little bit longer, but the money's definitely going to be there in one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting card for me as well, because when I look at this let me back up. We've talked about, I don't know how you want to refer to them, but like the core tribal pillars of this game before. We've talked about angels, dragons, vampires, elves,
vampires,
as such,
whatever.
Right?
Yeah.
And within each of those, you can be anywhere on the meter, from like dirt casual to like
spike running.
Yeah, I don't know why
combo.
you're this competitive with your builds. And when I look at Dragon Speaker Shaman, to me, this is a card that kind of swings towards the like really casual side of things, or into the like mono red dragon decks that don't touch green, where you have a lot of your ramp that allows you to just play like bomb after bomb after bomb dragon. could be something with the Dragon. I think that's the one getting the reprint, not Ramos. I think it's
Yeah, it's Dragon. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a 5-color dragon. That's very interesting in regards to color requirements. So it might be easier to play something like Dragon Speaker, Shaman, and Servant in that list overall than a lot of green ramp that can get you there. So I think there's also a little bit of like the dragon player profile that works its way into this, that plays into this, and I think that's something that I don't think it needs to weigh you down when you make this, but if you're looking to serve locally, like from a trade binder, understanding what those players run is really important. Are they playing like Mirim and Karthus that offer you green where those decks do want to see a lot of ramp, or are they playing like Lathless Dragon Queen, or there's another mono red one. I think it just it's not legendary that I'm thinking of, never mind. Yeah, or like Lathless and Ganax.
Yeah.
You know, or even for whatever people are playing like Zergo and Ojutai as a dragon deck. None of those decks touch green for ramp, so you have to get it somewhere else. Cards like this offer you that like pseudo ramp. It offers you a bit of that velocity.
Yeah.
So as an LGS like or vendor, like by all means go in. You know, serve like all of your clientele that way. It's pretty easy. If you're looking to backpack, I think this is a little more of like you got to understand your player profile, and I just think that's an interesting little like side note to this card overall. Otherwise, I am like a sucker for stuff like this, for mana value reducers, because when you have a big clunky deck like this, you need to be able to...
helps.
Yeah, exactly. You need to be able to slam a couple threats late in the game. And Dragon Speaker Shaman allows you to do that. It's why Giada, was a Font of Hope or whatever that angel was from SNC, is really good at the Helm of the Angel deck because it's good early and it's good late.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah, so like the angels that come after Giada, they don't get like pumped as much after a board wipe, but playing Giada and then like 2 or 3 angels afterwards allows you to start gaining that kind of snowball advantage again. Just like this. It cuts 2 mana off of your 4, 5, and 6 mana creatures. So eventually, you will be able to start slamming a couple of these in a given term. You know,
and especially in a format where Soul Ring is so prevalent. You know, this is with Soul Ring, this is 4 turns of tempo.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's huge for these decks.
Yeah.
What's the one that reduces Krosan Warchief, I think, that reduces beasts from the Scourge cycle
Krosan
as well?
Warchief, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many of these cards that have a huge impact that can actually, given the right shell, not just be casual cards, like you said. They can hit the competitive side.
Yeah.
Just depending on what you're trying to do.
Exactly. And like there are cards that mirror this that people will look at, mana value reducers, that could be too expensive for them. The medallions. Ruby Medallion, right? Tempest and then reprinted once. That just reduces the mana value of your red spells by 1 colorless. That is financially a very expensive card. But when the majority of your deck needs to be dragons, well, this does a lot of heavy lifting. It lifts harder than the medallion will in the deck overall. So it is a really good look in that regard too. So again, I like it. I think you need to, depending on what you are doing with this, what your goal is, you need to think about who your target audience is if you're backpacking, or if you're just going to be shuffling this around locally, what have you.
Yeah.
For me, I am also picking a card that plays off of Big Dumb Creatures, and I am looking at Rishkar's Expertise, sorcery from Aether Revolt, or the version from Aether Revolt in particular. 4 double green for sorcery, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, really good with dragons, and you may cast the card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Not a lot of dragons, but we can get some in there. Now, day of, back in February when I started tracking this, Card Kingdom was buying 44 at $1.30. TCG Market, there were 214 listings, LP or better, for $2.06. When I started taking my notes, Card Kingdom was buying 89 at $3. The set foil 6 at 7. Card Kingdom is now buying a lowly 73, down 16 copies overall, but they're buying it for $3.70. So that's like a 23% increase from when I was taking my notes. They are now also buying more copies of the set foil, 13, but for the same price, $7. That's kind of a crap. There were 126 TCG player listings at a market of $4.90 when I took my notes. And right now, looking at this, there are 143, so we're up 17 listings with a market of just about the same price. So, exactly, right? Markets stay the same, Card Kingdom's going up. Like, seems easy. Now, what does this card do? Well, I read it. It does draw cards. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, that at a minimum, that's what it does. It's card draw with upside. And for those of you keeping track at home, the credit price on Card Kingdom is $4.80, which is the TCG market price. Okay. Well, now, as far as the entirety of the format is concerned, I think there are several, like, quote, classes, unquote, of draw spells available to green decks. And looking at a card like Harmonize and a card like Rishkar's Expertise, you can see the difference between these kinds of classes. Sylvan Library as well would fall under the Harmonize.
Yeah.
And classing these spells isn't about power level of the draw spells. That's more ranking. It's about the limitations or requirements of these draw spells. And Rishkar's Expertise does require some chunk, like Last March of the Ents, which we're getting in Lord of the Rings, requires some badonk. Meanwhile, Harmonize has no requirements. Slate of Ancestry just requires a creature count. And so we can see how we're going to apply this to our draw spells when we look at this. And,
yeah,
you know, the majority of them in green. So, how do we classify and apply this information to Rishkar's Expertise? Well, it plays exactly where you'd expect it to in Commander. It's very on the nose. We classify it alongside Greater Good, Return of the Wild Speaker, and Soul's Majesty. These are all payoffs for playing creatures with an abundance of power. They help ensure that even in the mid to late game, with minimal presence, you can draw your way back through claw your way back through sheer card advantage. But with Rishkar's Expertise, you're also getting the cast effect, which pushes this version well beyond the rest of the pack. It is at the forefront of options when you're looking for draw spells. Like, you should be starting with your non-conditionals in Sylvan Library, and then Expertise should be underneath it if you're running creatures with power 5 or greater. Like, it's right there. You're getting two effects that, when combined, are wildly above rate, as you don't have to have the card in hand that you're going to play before you draw. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, you can play a card that's already in hand.
Yeah.
After you draw. Like, it's this, like, pseudo tooth and nail kind of thing, where it's just like you put the cards in your hand and then you make a decision afterwards. It doesn't matter what's there.
Mm-hmm.
I think people might get hung up on it, where it's just like, I gotta cast Rishkar's Expertise at the right time to make sure I get the most value out of it and draw the thing I need. In reality, you could have already tutored up the thing you need. It could be in hand already. Then you just draw your 6 cards and play the thing you already had. That is a way, exactly, that is a way to play this card.
Yeah.
And of note, you can cast any spell through this. It's not bound to a specific type. It might seem like it is tied to creatures because the draw is contingent on creatures, but it's not. Play whatever you want afterwards. Just not a land because it says cast, not play. Only difference. So if you're basically playing, you know, a green Chonkers deck, this is by and far the best draw spell within its class, regardless of whether you're more of a competitive or casual kind of deck.
Yeah.
Right. So
I like this card a lot, especially considering that it's held its value despite the reprints. The fact that it's from a set that was heavily open because of masterpieces, that it was printed in Commander Streets of New Capenna, Forgotten Realms, like these are recent, and Neon Dynasty. These are all recent printings, and it is still held at $2 to $5. To me, that says it hits enough of the casual market to really hold a price in a meaningful way.
Yep.
It's even if it does get reprinted at some point, the recent reprints have all been fairly small, and it's tied to Kaladesh. Rishkar was an elf on Kaladesh. Yep. And we just had the Avengers assemble through all of Magic history, and Rishkar didn't make an appearance.
Nope.
I don't think we'll get a set where he does anytime soon.
Nope. Right. So my timeline for this, it's kind of funny. So we're buying in after the recovery, and I'll bring this back up on stocks. So, and we'll talk about why this falls off a fucking cliff in a moment. But we're buying in after the recovery, so we're already behind. This is one of those picks where It's going to happen. But based on the current price slope for the set version, again, we're looking only at Aether Revolt in terms of numbers right now. If we were to buy in now, we should be able to churn this back into the open market within the next few months. In my notes, I would think weeks, because that's already happened. Between when I started taking my notes and the filming of this episode, like a week later, we've gone past that point.
Yeah.
So with that said, I'd expect to hold on to these for like maybe 3 months max until the market price crests solidly past $6.
Yeah.
And a similar timeline can also be applied to the Neon Dynasty, Capenna, and AFR Commander variants as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we're looking at buy lists, CK was very slow to update, which is why we are behind on this pick. I wanted to see vendor adoption, and now that we have that in spades, I do believe CK will continue to raise the price over time, but I do believe they'll continue to lag behind the market, and thus we're looking at maybe 3 to 6 months because of the way this just shot up very quickly. I think that's our window. Reprint equity, WotC just chain printed this in Commander products back to back to back, so I would expect that to happen again, but I'm not worried as this did recover pretty well. And if we go back to the stocks graph again, so it falls off a fucking cliff, and we hit our low point at about July 2022, and it starts to rebound in January of 2023. So let's say it took about 6 months for this card to start climbing, and it really has not stopped since. It took 3 Commander printings to kill to kill the slope that it was on, and then the crowd went wild and said, "Cool, thank you," and just ate up supply. Here we are. By quantity, I re-up on these honestly each time they're printed. So that was like 3 sets in a row. And I bought into one of the 2 dips that we saw here, and I think I have probably close to a dozen left of just mixed sets. Because it gets printed, I buy it because it's a little bit cheaper. Again, printed, buy it, printed, buy it. And it's just, I don't think I've moved a single one of these. I just like ramp in Commander, so I play Rishkar's Expertise because I'm probably also playing some big creatures. Even the Toski deck I have plays Rishkar's Expertise alongside Return of the Wild Speaker, because you suit up an indestructible squirrel, it gets big fast, they both allow you to draw cards equal to power. The only difference is that Rishkar's Expertise allows me to continue chaining through my enchantments, while Return of the Wild Speaker has like a knock somebody out of the game mode. Is it +3/+3 and trample on return?
I think so.
Nope, just +3/+3. Like,
oh, okay, yep.
So that's the only reason I would play Return of the Wild Speaker in that deck. Really, is the +3/+3. I don't need the second copy of the card. It's just nice to have, and it's better than Soul's Majesty. And this is, as far as the classing was concerned that I talked about earlier, Sylvan Library was the first draw spell I had for a large number of reasons, and then these 2 spells, because they do exactly what I need them to, which is draw me a very large amount of cards, because I have one really big squirrel.
Yeah. It's super, super, super nice. Yeah. Big fan.
Yeah, and if people want to take a look at the cycle, I think Brawl's Expertise is like the next best one to look at.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it did see a little bit of tournament play, but I don't believe it has a price based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sitting at a floor. It moved up a little bit. The market value readjusted, and now we're just kind of sitting flat at like 75 cents to $1. Like, these spells are powerful overall. Yeah. That's what it was. Brawl's Expertise, if you look at the price graph on stocks, pops because we got Hinata, the Dawn Crowned.
Yeah.
Which makes it a 2 mana value spell because you can't reduce the cost past or below double blue.
Yep.
So you got that going for you.
Yeah, I love all of these cards because they are such a cool, nice, like, design.
Yeah.
It's advantage in every color. They all do a thing that color does while generating advantage in some way. And this one, to me, is the best one because of the broad appeal. because it does draw cards in green, because it's a big, dumb creature card. Even if you're just splashing green, how many decks are there that are just big, dumb creatures?
Yeah, and it's only 2. Yeah, it's only 2 pips. It's not that difficult to hit.
If it was like, what's the Primal Crux or something with like 6 pips?
Oh my god,
that
yeah,
sucks.
That card's insane.
This thing only has 2. It's good. I like it a lot. I think it's a really solid look, and I think long term, it's one of the better things that you can really be investing in out of those sets, because it does have that value to it despite the constant reprints recently.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
big fan.
I was hoping it would recover like it did. It stormed back a little more aggressively than I thought it would, and it also serves as a good use case of like, this is a card that appeals broadly to Commander players that play green. That's it. That's the requirement. You play Commander and you play green.
Yeah.
And
big fan.
Yeah, and that you also play creatures, and that's it. And when a card like that gets reprinted, especially from a newer set, and demand starts to sink back in, we can expect them to follow these trajectories, because we do continue to see it like again and again and again. And I bet if we look at Panharmonicon, which does keep getting reprinted in odd supplemental products with alt arts here and there, we'll see that card take similar trajectories. And it just serves as a lesson that every time a card like this gets a reprint, it generally stabilizes for a little bit, and then it coasts back up. The last time it was Panharmonicon is currently recovering from Double Masters and Time Spiral Remastered with an alt art in one of those sets. It bottomed out at $4, and it's now back up over $6. This is just a lesson to be learned.
Pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. If it's a recent card and it's just gobbled up by Commander players and there's continuous demand, you can feel pretty safe buying into the dip.
Yep.
So,
big fan.
Now, that's all I've got for this week. Anything from you?
No, I'm good.
All right. So, we are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, I am at HaltIamReptar. You are
at Thirsty Sizzler.
And we'll see you next week.